Imagine standing alone in a frozen forest, surrounded by angry warriors holding axes, and you decide the best move is to chop down their god. No backup, no army, just you and a belief that you're right. Welcome to the history you didn't learn in Sunday school. We like to think of church history as a series of boring meetings where old men with beards decided on creeds. But the reality? The reality is blood, mud, fire, and terrors that would make a horror movie director blush. We are talking about spiritual warfare, not the metaphorical kind where you have a bad day in traffic. I'm talking about recorded historical events where the early believers went toe-to-toe with sorcerers, druids, ancient curses, and distinct, intelligent evil. Today, we are digging into 5 of the most terrifying, jaw-dropping spiritual battles in history. These are the moments where the veil between the seen and the unseen got ripped wide open. And stick around, because while the first few are legendary victories, the fourth one, it exposes a darkness within the church itself that we are still paying for today. Battle number 1, the tomb of Saint Antony. Let's go back to the 3rd century. Egypt. A young man named Antony decides that the Christianity in the city has gotten too soft, too comfortable. So does he start a blog? No, he moves into an empty tomb in the desert. Now, historically, the desert wasn't just hot sand. In the ancient Near Eastern mind, the desert was the dwelling place of demons. It was enemy territory. Antony moves in, and according to his biographer Athanasius, the enemy didn't take it well. This wasn't a quiet meditation retreat. The texts record that Antony was physically assaulted, beaten unconscious by unseen forces. His friends found him half dead, dragged him to a church, and the moment he woke up, he begged them to carry him back to the tomb. He yelled into the darkness, "Here I am, Antony! I am not running from your blows." Suddenly, the walls of the tomb seemed to crack open, the room filled with the shapes of lions, bears, leopards, bulls, and scorpions, all rushing to attack him. It sounds like a hallucination, right? Except this battle birthed the entire monastic movement. Antony's standoff proved that faith wasn't just an intellectual agreement, it was a weapon. He walked out of that tomb not broken, but glowing with a peace that attracted thousands. He proved that if you want to find God, sometimes you have to walk straight into the dark. Battle number 2, the fire on the hill of slain. Fast forward to 433 AD, Ireland. This is the story of St. Patrick, but forget the cartoon leprechauns. Patrick was walking into a land ruled by Druids who wielded serious political and mystical power. It was the eve of Beltane, a pagan festival. The High King Leoger had issued a decree: no fire could be lit in all Ireland until the king lit the sacred fire on the Hill of Tara. To break this law was instant death. So what does Patrick do? He goes to the opposing hill, the Hill of Slain, visible for miles, and lights a massive paschal fire. The Druids went into a panic. They told the king, if that fire is not quenched tonight, it will never be quenched in Ireland. They rushed the hill with chariots. According to the ancient records, this wasn't just a debate. The Druids used incantations to cover the hill in a supernatural darkness. Patrick, unbothered, recited prayers that broke the gloom. When the chief druid tried to curse him, the man was reportedly tossed into the air and dashed against a rock. It was a power encounter. Patrick wasn't asking for permission to exist, he was demonstrating a superior authority. The king's fire went out, Patrick's kept burning. Battle number 3, the Thunder Oak. Let's go to Germany, 723 AD. Enter Boniface. The Germanic tribes worshipped Thor, the god of thunder. Their most sacred site was a massive oak tree at Geismar. The locals believed that if you touched it, Thor would strike you dead with lightning. Boniface shows up, grabs an axe, and walks up to the tree. A massive crowd of pagans surrounds him, waiting for him to explode. He takes a swing. Thwack! Nothing happens. He takes another. Then the wind picks up, but it wasn't a storm from Thor. A sudden, mighty wind blast hit the oak, and the records say the tree didn't just fall, it burst into 4 equal parts. The crowd stood in silence. Their god hadn't shown up. Boniface used the wood to build a chapel. This is the moment that broke the back of Germanic paganism. It's a cool story, right? We love seeing the good guys win against the scary idols. But this is where we need to pause, because the next battle, this is the one I warned you about. It's the most terrifying one on this list, not because of demons, but because of who the bad guys turned out to be. Battle number 4, the Panic at Salem. 1692, Massachusetts. You know the story, but you've probably missed the real spiritual war. We usually frame this as the church versus witches. But look closer at the history. There is very little evidence that there was any actual organized witchcraft in Salem. The battle here was the institution of the church turning on its own community. This is where things get messy. When the church becomes an institution obsessed with its own power and purity, it starts seeing enemies everywhere. The spiritual warfare in Salem wasn't the judges fighting the devil. It was the devil using the fear of the judges to destroy the community. They hanged their neighbors. They crushed an old man to death with stones because he wouldn't enter a plea. This is the perspectival shift you need to understand. The greatest trick of the enemy isn't always a pagan idol or a druid spell. Sometimes it's a religious hierarchy so paranoid about maintaining control that it eats its own children. They forgot that early Christianity wasn't about courtrooms and executions. It was about tables, homes, and grace. Salem is a monument to what happens when we trust the structure more than the spirit. It's terrifying because it was done in God's name. Battle number 5. The cry of Gottliebin Dittus. Let's end on a note of redemption, but a weird one. 1842, Mottlingen, Germany. A pastor named Johann Blumhardt. This is arguably the best documented case of exorcism in modern history. A young woman, Gottliebin Dittus, began suffering violent, unexplainable attacks, strange voices, objects moving, physical contortions. Blumhardt didn't call a council. He didn't ask the bishop for permission. He didn't use a golden cross or holy water. He simply realized that the institutional church had no answer for raw evil. He spent 2 years praying with her, not preaching at her, with her. It was a battle of endurance. Finally, in a moment that shook the town, the voice within her screamed, "Jesus is victor," and fled. Here is the kicker. That moment sparked a revival that swept across Europe, but it didn't happen in a cathedral. It happened in a house. It happened because one man stopped playing church and actually believed that Jesus had authority over darkness. So why do these stories matter? Because we've been sold a sanitized version of faith. We build big buildings, elect committees, and think we're safe. But history shows us that the real spiritual battles happen in the wild, in the desert tombs, on the pagan hills, and in the messy living rooms of people in pain. The institution often fails. It failed in Salem. But the organic, relational faith, the kind Antony had, the kind Blumhardt rediscovered, that is where the power is. The question isn't whether you believe in ghosts or demons. The question is, if the darkness showed up at your door today, would you have a form of godliness, or would you have the power? Think about that.